That is 6. So we are ready to go in. I'm going to start off by reading the now civility and respect pledge to remind everybody of the importance of choosing our words carefully tonight. Civility and respect should be at the heart of public life, and good governance is fundamental to ensuring an effective and well-functioning democracy at all levels. The intimidation, abuse, bullying and harassment of councillors, clerks and council staff, in person or online, is unacceptable, whether by councillors, clerks, council staff or public members. Any person adjudged by the chair of the meeting to have breached this rule may be asked to apologise, withdraw their statement and or leave the meeting. Right.
Is there a seat there?
Right. Oh, and I would like to remind everybody we are recording and live streaming the meeting. Item 1, to receive and accept apologies for absence.
We've got Councillor Moores, Councillor Good and Councillor Brown.
To receive declarations of registered and non-registered disclosable pecuniary interest and non-registrable interests.
None received.
Dispensations, to consider requests for dispensations.
None received.
None received. Okay, I'm going to break from the agenda at this point and exercise my right to make a statement. It is not an item for debate, and as Mayor of the Town Council, I wish to make the following statement. I've spent the last 2 weeks watching a situation unfold in the national media and in social media outlets. I've been asked for comment many times, so have the Council, and other than issuing a factual statement, we have not responded. But I've chosen to respond here directly to the people of Bude-Stratton, as this is the correct place to make that response. First, I'm going to clear up a few discrepancies in what I've seen in the media and on social media. In December 2022, the Town Council staff drafted a flag flying protocol, guidance for councillors regarding the flying of flags from Town Council flagpoles. The protocol was the expressed aim of giving the community confidence that the council is following an agreed process when making decisions about flying flags. The protocol was discussed by the Town Council's Oversight Committee in December 2022, which resolved, with amendments, to recommend it to full council for approval. The protocol was approved by full council at its meeting held on the 12th of January 2023. The protocol stated that during the month of June and for Pride weekend in July, appropriate Pride flags would be flown from Town Council flagpoles. It's also specified that on the anniversary of D-Day on the 6th of June and during Armed Forces weekend on the 24th and 25th of June, the Union flag would be the only flag flown from Shower Hill. Whilst this meant that the Pride flag would be lowered for 3 days in June from the Shower Hill flagpole, it would remain flying from the Town Council's 3 other flagpoles. That's an important point that wasn't made clear in the media or on social media. Additionally, Pride flags were flown from all 4 Town Council flagpoles for the month of February 2023 to mark LGBT plus History Month. The castle has twice been illuminated in rainbow colours for Pride Month, and the Council has spent considerable time and money in seeking planning consent to fly the Pride Progress flag from the castle flagpole during the month. The castle grounds and the Park House Community Centre were made available to view Pride in June 2022 in exchange for an advertisement for the Town Council event in a Pride publication. The Town Council has also funded 2 grant applications from View Pride. To date, the only occasions on which flags representing a particular cause, organisation or nation has been flown simultaneously from all 4 Town Council flagpoles has been Pride History Month and Pride Month. Important to note that level of support. The Council has been navigating the sensitivities of flag flying and balancing the expectations of different sections of the community. The Council has agreed the flagpole's goal that ceased. Sorry, slightly lower my train of. The Council has agreed a flag protocol that sees the Union flag alone flown during D-Day commemorations and Armed Forces Day celebrations from the Shelter Hill flag hall, due to its proximity to the War Memorial. Now, I'm just going to address a couple of things that were in the print media in reference to behaviour in this council chamber. I have to state that I was not in that meeting, so I am not an eyewitness. I have reviewed the footage online, the recorded footage. I've asked a staff member to review it, and I've also asked a trusted friend to review it. And it is my opinion, having watched the video footage, that recent press articles have misrepresented the conduct of certain people in this chamber during town council meetings, during which the flag flying issue has been discussed. Quite serious allegations were made that I can find no evidence to support. Thus ends the correction of the facts. And now a little statement I prepared myself. It won't have escaped your notice that Bude has been in the international media over the last few weeks, but sadly for all the wrong reasons. We've presented a picture of ourselves to the outside world that confirms some of the worst stereotypes that abound in society today, none of which is a true or fair representation of the community. It's disappointing that we've managed to paint a picture of division rather than what we are, a small, close-knit community that by and large gets along despite our differences, that disagrees agreeably and works together for the common good. That we have decided, in a month that calls for and celebrates tolerance, acceptance and inclusion, to choose division and conflict is to me a fundamental failing, and one that we should as a community be ashamed of. We couldn't, on a single issue about a single flag on a single day, seek to understand another's perspective, acknowledge that we may have differences of opinion, that those views held are heartfelt and work together to find a solution that would have worked for all. Instead, we dug our trenches, we shared distorted versions of the facts on social media, and maligned much of the good work this council and our wider community has done to create a tolerant and accepting Bude, where all are welcome. Rather than seeking to understand and find a way as a community to reconcile our differences, we presented, and I believe this with all my heart, a false view of an intolerant community on both sides, entrenched in its division, unable to comprehend the other as a fellow human being. When we take fundamentalist positions, conflict and division are inevitable. When we lie, we damage way more than those we see as enemies. And when we fail to come together, we don't heal. If there has been any good to come out of this lamentable episode, it is that we've seen as a community that perhaps we need to preach a little less, listen a little more, and work together a little better. I hope that you will work with me in future so that next time we make the international media, it is for something good. Thank you.
I will.
That's the end. We're going to move on with the agenda now.
Not on the agenda, but you were notified. Can we, if Mr. Mayor will allow, can we take the urgent item on the way consent? Hopefully you've all seen the paper. I can explain a little more for those who haven't, if you wish. Effectively, we've been asked for waiver consent across the patch of ground between the exit road of somebody's car park and somebody's crescent. This is to allow for the sinking of low voltage electricity cables to connect charging points in somebody's car park. The urgency is a decision is needed this week. So that's why it's been taken as an urgent item. If the decision isn't given this week, potentially the funding could be lost and you could lose those charges. So it's reasonably straightforward. It's a standard way leave. We will get a nominal amount for having the lines across our land. But any questions, do please ask.
Can I ask, sorry, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask that these cables, I presume, going underground?
Indeed.
But because otherwise visually they would.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, unless there's anything else, I propose we...
Second, yeah.
Okay, all in favour?
Thank you very much.
Okay, minutes. To receive and confirm and sign the minutes of the extraordinary full council meeting held on the 15th of June 2023.
Suppose we do.
I second that. All in favour? Against? Abstained. Committees. To receive and note the minutes of the committee meetings listed below. Planning Committee, 7th and 21st of June 2023. I propose we do that. All in favour? Against? Abstained. Oversight Committee, 15th of June 2023.
Propose do that.
All in favour? Against? Abstained. Staffing Committee, 26th of June 2023.
Propose to do that.
I second that. All in favour? Against? Abstained. Recommendations. To consider and agree that the Staffing Committee recommend the proposed changes to the staffing structure to full council along with costing. Oh, right, yes. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Somebody just told me that there's no sound on the live stream.
Does that mean you're interested?
I would quite happily do so. But I can't be misquoted or misrepresented.
I think it's good.
Picking up sound.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, well, we'll try that.
Okay. Where did I get to? Staffing Committee.
Yeah.
That's it. That the Staffing Committee recommend the proposed changes to the staffing structure to full council along with costings. Right. We are about to discuss, well, we're not going to about to discuss it. This is a staffing issue. If we're going to get into the intricacies of the recommendation, I am going to have to clear the room because we are discussing staff and pay. So, just bear that in mind before we go forward. Obviously, this was the one that came before staffing, and it went through unanimously.
It would manage, unanimous.
No, this is the one about hiring people, isn't
No.
Yeah, the first one is
it?
about.
The first one is hiring people, the second one is committees.
No.
Yeah. So effectively, what has happened here is we had a staffing meeting where all 4 department managers came in. We discussed workload, amongst other things, and they put forward recommendations for what they need to complete the current workload by the end of this council's term. So, no new projects, nothing else on the table, just what we have currently got, finished in 2 years' time. The recommendations you have seen emailed to you are what our staff believe they need.
Whereas we accept those recommendations?
I'll second it, but I'll say a few words in doing so.
Say your words carefully, please.
No, I think it's probably quite easy. So the staffing committee met to discuss the workload of the current council, along with the individual service managers, and there were several vacuums of service, so to speak, where we were struggling to keep up with the workload that the relatively ambitious council has set for our officers. And the council officers explained very clearly to the committee that if they were to deliver on the expectations that we have of them, then these extra positions were needed. And we have been presented, and this is probably a bit that's probably a little bit more difficult to share, but we've been presented with costings, along with potential cost savings that effectively make it a quid pro quo, and it will make very little difference to the overall out cost or cost output of the council. So I'm happy to second it because it's recommendations that come forward from our own managers in order to meet the expectations that we've put on them ourselves.
In the back.
Well, one thing I wanted to say was that when we were at staffing committee, we didn't have the costings and we didn't have the potential funding sources. So, although personally I'm still prepared to accept the need for the staff, most of which I think we have already agreed by various committees that we need. I think that the potential funding sources need some more discussion, and I'm assuming that because it says potential funding sources, that is something that's up for debate. You know, for example, there's a mention there about Lord's Court income, which, you know, personally I don't think it's appropriate to consider that income away from the expenditure of Lord's Court. So, you know, my personal feeling would be that we should do this year out of reserves, and that we should consider the cost in the revenue budget next year, not be kind of, I don't know, not be chipping away at things that we're not 100% sure where we'll get the money from or where it's coming from. But I'm assuming that we can take the recommendation without narrowing down the potential funding sources.
I was going to say, yeah.
If you don't mind. So the potential costings that were put forward were put together from the outgoing clerk and RFO just as some guidance to us to provide you. So in terms of whether or not they can be amended, I presume that's not going to be an issue. It's just he was trying to provide some confirmation that we had the funding in place now to be able to achieve that, because obviously we've already done the budgets for this year.
Jack, you know,
I just find it very difficult to separate the two items, the recruitment and the restructure, because the issue I have is just with timing. We're for 1 month we're without a permanent town clerk. We've gone through a recruitment process and await the start of a new clerk who's got a good amount of experience, has worked with a variety of council structures, management of team of staff, and even facilitated a restructure, which I know is the next item. We're paying someone to lead, and I just think it's appropriate that we're allowed to carry out that role. I'm not averse to change. I'm certainly not averse to taking on additional staff to handle the increased workload. I could accept that is a need, and it's really something that we've been absolutely pushing for the last 2 years. But I just feel it's wrong to put it through in the July meeting, knowing that we're going to have a new town clerk in place on the 1st of August.
well, the reason it's been split in two is obviously both come out of the staffing committee. Part 1 is in relation to staff. Part 2 does not change anything in regards to staff at all. Part 2 is the people sat around this table realigning themselves and the committees with the current staff structure. So I'm not sure where the clerk comes into that. She's in charge of the staff, not the actual elected representatives.
Well, I think it's fundamental that she should be involved in the decision. And we've elected someone to
She doesn't
lead.
get a vote at this table when we structure a committee.
I feel very
Ian isn't
comfortable
going to sit his hand up
that
tonight.
we're suggesting this without even consulting her. And we're waiting. In 3 weeks' time, she'll be in position. Why in this meeting and not next meeting?
Because in 3 weeks' time she will be in position, but in no position to understand what the council staff have fed back to us. You know, and this came about. Sian had a meeting with Mark, which she put stuff out. That probably expedited it. I was already meeting department heads, and I was hearing the same thing over and over again. And Sian sent her email out about her interaction with Mark. It pretty much fed into what I'd already heard from 2 others. So I called all 4 senior managers together and asked them to be brutally honest with me, and they were. And at that point, I decided the staffing committee needed to be aware of these issues. I can take your point. I can see there is a sensible argument for the clerk being in place in regards to staffing changes, but there seems to be a slight, I don't know whether it's in the way it was sent out, I don't know, The second one is the staffing committee to restructure the committees. That's us. That's not the staff. We restructure the committees. And we staff the committees with ourselves, and we vote to do it. And it doesn't matter who sat to my left or right, they don't get a vote.
To agree to
You
disagree.
may.
I think fundamental to the reason of why we wanted to move quickly on this is the pressures on staff at the moment in terms of the workload mean that as soon as possible to recruit those staff would be beneficial to us. And deferring this for another month to then have a clerk who's new in post to get her head around why we need these, to then start a process of recruitment, to then recruit someone, to then wait a month whilst they give notice of perhaps their current employment, would probably see us not getting new staff in place until the end of this year. And I think the pressure on staff at the moment, if I can, Mr. Mayor, is such that we'd really rather expedite this as soon as possible.
So you got your hand up in that one?
Yeah, I think I was going to be on the same sort of lines as Jackie, if I'm honest. Only just wanted to express that it's unfortunate timing, I think, from the new clerk's point of view, if we're going to make quite a big decision like that right before she comes in. I can totally get what Ian's saying as well, because I've seen for myself the last 2 years, you know, that up to their eyeballs is an understatement, you know, so I get it, and I would never kind of, you know, deprive anybody of something that's very much needed.
Sorry, just to clarify, are you talking about hiring additional staff
Yeah.
or restructuring the committees?
I'm talking about the hiring of staff, because that's
Hiring
quite
staff.
a big deal, yeah, and I worry how, has anyone actually spoken to the new clerk? Just curious. I just wanted
I
to
haven't, because we've not appointed her until item 8.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, unless something seriously flashes up, it's going to go through, but yes.
I just worry about someone coming in and it getting off on a bit of a bad foot, I guess, from the very beginning. And it's not to say, because I'm always very for getting extra support if they need it, always have been. So it's definitely not anything like that. I worry that we're kind of doing something quite big right in the last couple of weeks before she comes in. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I can totally understand that, but looking at it a different way, we're also doing something very big just before the busiest time of the year.
Sure, yeah.
To give the people, I know of one staff member that's racked up over 150 hours of time off in lieu.
Yeah,
That's going into summer.
yeah.
So,
I know, yeah.
Kevin,
I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed that this hasn't been flagged up vigorously earlier. We have had oversight committees, we have had reports from the management team, and although people have presented arguments that, you know, their workload is high, I haven't heard it in the extreme terms that you obviously have with Shine. And I think it's a little bit disappointing that somehow communication through oversight hasn't happened as it should have, and this stuff hasn't been flagged up as fiercely as it could have been at an earlier stage. With the sort of granular detail that we're getting through now in terms of bodies and payroll accounts. However, having said that, I accept that if we are to trust the management team of the council and we are to trust people to do their jobs and they're telling us that they need these resources, and it doesn't appear to be an impossible ask that we can, one way or another, manage our finances in order to facilitate these resources, I think in this bit, the additional resources bit, that we should put our hands up and say yes.
okay. Just to respond to that, the reason for part 2, restructuring the committees and realigning ourselves with staff, pretty much answers your point there about why has this not been flagged up before. There's one person that manages our biggest budget, currently does not report to a committee. There is another senior staff member who reports to 2. He gives the same reports to 2. So why are we not getting the information we need? It's because some people don't have the channels through which to do it. And this is an attempt to do that. I don't want to get on to part 2 without part 1, but that is why we have suggested realigning the current committees and creating one more so that each department manager has that committee to build a close relationship with the chair, the deputy chair, and those people gain an in-depth knowledge of everything that's going on, and they become a little bit more agile, and that chain of communication starts to work a little bit better. You know, you have just hit the nail on the head. We do not know about this because the current structure has not worked as well as it was intended, and that's fine, we learn. But when you find out that you have these issues, do you carry on blindly saying, okay, or, you know, at that point, you just, you know, it's not, you know, we're talking about this as a massive change. It's not really. Planning stays as it is, staffing stays as it is, oversight will report to, or will be with Steve, facilities. Properties is what's currently the Stratton Stores one, you know, they just take on responsibility for a couple of extra properties. Democratic Services, the offices, that still comes through me at full council. We need one more committee, which will be Mark, Heritage, so that he has somebody to directly interact with, they will have a close working relationship, and that information all feeds back. You know, at the moment, we've got Frankie as a project manager, not reporting to anyone. Just think about that for just a minute. If it's something to do with Storm Tower, she talks to Peter. If it's something to do with skate park, she talks to me. She handles our biggest budget and does not have a committee to support her. Sharon?
Yeah, I do feel like there's a bit of enmeshment with these two points on the agenda. So the first point about the extra staffing resource, from my mind, after the conversation that I had with Mark and then the conversation that happened at the staffing committee, it's a no-brainer that we take on the resources that are required to meet the expectations that we put on the staff. That's fine. I think my only concern with that specifically is that the new clerk be in post to have some oversight of who those staff are. So I don't know what the time difference is, but someone that's going to be managing those members of staff, I don't know. There does seem to be, it makes sense that taking on new roles be kind of handled under the remit of the person who will be their boss. That's just my really personal perspective. So just literally talking about the resourcing of the new staff, I think, yeah, we need that, to be as agile as we want to be as a council. And the other item is separate, but I think these are quite big changes, and to combine them into one thing, I think muddies the waters and makes me personally feel like we're being kind of bounced into a decision quite quickly. We've only just seen the figures, that's fine, but I would have wished there'd been a bit more time to unpack those kind of figures at the staffing committee. I know timing is a massive issue, but yeah, I'm just voicing my concerns about that because I did voice those concerns at staffing. I just think to do something like this, it's not a small amount of resourcing. So yeah,
It's a fair point, and no matter what we agree in regards to hiring people, probably by the time we've done the adverts, we've done the paper shuffle, the clerk will be into sitting on interviews, I would have thought.
that's
You know,
what we're doing.
we
Yeah,
could
I really
even
hope that's the case.
specify that, yeah.
Along with the management team who will be
Exactly, yes,
to the
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm not suggesting we just run out and hire somebody tomorrow. I don't think the staff is
I
suggesting
don't
we
think
need
it would
that.
happen that quickly.
No, exactly. So,
yeah.
Tom?
From what I can see, all the members who've spoken are actually on the staffing committee, and I think the rest of us are a bit of a loss because of the requirement for this to be held in, without members present. I see that the terms of reference for the staffing committee, probably for most committees, is to consider such matters as may be delegated by the council from time to time. It sounds to me that perhaps the staffing committee needs to reconsider it, or get its get this clear, and whether I don't feel comfortable about voting one way or the other because I don't have enough information. And is it something we could delegate to the staffing committee to make a decision?
Yeah,
The Park House coordinator role, I feel like there's some implicit criticism here that the councillors haven't acted swiftly enough on these vacancies. Park House coordinator role was suggested in a forum report of the Park House Committee, I'm saying in November last year. And so that has been on the table for all that amount of time. So what I would say to that is that the reason that hasn't happened is beyond the control of the councillors sitting there on this table. That has been on the table and agreed, pushed from oversight through into the staffing committee and approved. The toilet cleaning operative also came to oversight. We discussed it through with Steve and he explained to us the situation, and we again put a recommendation into staffing committee. So kind of to answer your question a bit, Tom, these things haven't just gone, those two things didn't just come from the staffing committee out of the blue, those two things came from recommendations to oversight. The project officer and the graphic designer, to be honest, were surprises that came at staffing committee, but we argued pretty much constantly with the outgoing clerk that we needed more project resource. We asked for maternity leave to be covered, and it wasn't covered. We asked for project resource to be brought in, and an advert went out for a kind of generic office role, and no project resource was brought in as a result of that, but that was approved with the staffing committee. The graphic designer role is a different role which we heard about more in the staffing committee, and I don't know, feels to me, leaving aside the issue of the 150 hours of loo time, which I think is an issue that has to be sorted out via management, a different management approach by the whole management team. Leaving that aside, it sounds to me like the graphic designer post is a reasonable ask.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the staffing committee, if you looked into it, like you say, that was effectively the only new one.
But
I think we agreed unanimously, I can't remember, it went on a while.
What I'm trying to emphasise is that although we have the management team looking at us here, like we have been complacent in our duty about these stuff, we certainly haven't. And it's difficult to know why that situation has happened. It's difficult to know, for example, why the deputy town clerk role took 9 months to bring in, when that was approved on the day it was approved and the advert didn't go out until months later. It's difficult to know why the replacement town clerk role, the advert for that went out so late. So late, in fact, that we've now got a situation where we've got a gap, when we could have easily had a situation where there was a handover. So it's difficult to know, but I just want to express that I feel personally kind of almost in a way upset about the fact that there appears to be, an accusation that we weren't on this straight away. And we were, and we have been, and we've been pushing, and we've been pushing. So that's just something that I feel like I want to explain.
Yeah. Obviously, I can't respond to that because I've only been there 2 months and I've only been in staffing 2 months. Just to address Tom's point, obviously, I take what you're saying about you weren't in staffing, but we have to hold staffing committee meetings. Invites go out to everybody, whether they're voting members or not, and if they can attend and do, that's fantastic. If they don't, we don't really have another forum at the moment where we can discuss those private matters. The staffing committee was last Monday. The papers have gone out and...
But don't non-voting members have to leave?
Yeah. Well, in that case, I think you just have to trust the staffing committee.
Oh, that's why I was saying delegate the decision to...
Well, the staffing committee voted unanimously for point 1, and we are now making a recommendation to the full council, which is what which is the legal requirement to enact it. So that's the thing, is we have discussed this in private with... Hello there, can somebody help him? Yeah, you know, that is our recommendation.
I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, we are, yeah, sorry, we're
Trust to staff, but it's been discussed over and over again, if that's the recommendation.
yeah, there's been, what Philip has said is true, and I have no reason to doubt it, it's been discussed before, so, you know, it's been recommended several times, and we're still there. Frankie, and then I think we need to...
I'm getting messages that the live stream is very patchy still.
As in sound?
Sound, and it keeps stopping.
Well, I've been in the store for the last 2 weeks, but I'm not responsible for that. Frankie, you know.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Jennifer because I think there's no accusations, we're not targeting the
Darky.
council members. I think what we're trying to do is bring this to your attention in a more productive way, giving you solutions. And I think the answer to your questions of why these things haven't happened sooner is quite simply because the town clerk has been so busy that he didn't have the time to do those things and expedite them in a way that would have alleviated some of these pressures earlier. No other reason. And we're not accusing the council of ignoring us. I think what we're trying to do is say, actually, there is a serious issue here. It's obviously not been addressed because of the pyramid system that we have in place. So the management team took it upon themselves to try and find some solutions to move this way forward.
Okay. Well, I still think we need to take these in 2 separate parts. Yeah.
I would prefer to take them in two. Can I talk, Chair?
You may indeed.
I would indeed prefer to take these in 2 separate parts because I have found problems about the second one. But the first one, I am willing to accept staff's judgment on this, that they need the resources. And it seems to me that this has gone backwards and forwards many times. I understand that there are some things that need to be worked out. But I personally think it is possible to separate out those two things. I would not like to be in a position of voting against the first one at all because I think there's a resource.
That's why we did it this way, effectively. That's why it was agendaed to separate them.
Suffice to say, I have had a conversation with the incoming clerk today, and she's made her views known to me.
Which are?
She has strong feelings about the staffing issues, but I think she feels that deferring them might be helpful, but she's not yet clerk, so just passing on those views.
Thank you.
Go on.
Can I just say that if these people are needed, we need to act on it now. Because otherwise, it'll be Christmas and we'll still be talking about it. The advert won't have gone out there. It's going to take several days, weeks, to get those adverts worded correctly.
Yes.
It's then going to take the whole process of time of applications. It could be 2 months before we're actually looking at potential interview dates.
Yeah.
So could we vote on this first bit?
Somebody proposed and seconded.
You proposed
Right, fair enough. In that case, yeah, sorry. All in favour? Against? Abstained? That was for point 1. Point 2. Kevin?
I think on point 2, we need to be very mindful of the views of the new clerk. I was under the impression that part of the HR review was going to be a look at the structure of the council, who reports to whom and why. And looking at the structure of the council, and I must admit I've sat around this table for 12 months now and not fully understood the relationship between what we call democratic services and what we call corporate services. I was under the impression that there was a project manager that did time-bound, discrete projects, and everything else reported through the deputy clerk to the clerk. So I was surprised to see a sort of projects and strategy manager that sat above potentially a legal team and potentially a big chunk of what I would see as the day-to-day operation of the council. That's what the organisational chart looked like to me. I might be misreading it. Now, I believe that any new leader coming in, whether it's a leader of a private organisation or the leader of an authority, should be able to look at the organisation structure and potentially make changes. And I think that what happens in the council and the library, that is obviously a discrete unit. What happens with the facilities team is obviously a discrete unit. The relationship between project strategy and the other day-to-day operations of the council and the office and the Parkhouse Centre isn't, to me, self-evidently set up a right way or a wrong way now. And the clerk might have a view upon that. So, in terms of the reorganised committees to reflect the structure that we've been presented, I would say that that was held in abeyance to give the clerk time to look at the structure, to consider whether it's the most appropriate structure, and then the clerk with the management team come forward again to suggest a change in the committee structure, if indeed we need one. Because I think to create this structure now, then the clerk comes in and says, well, really, I don't like the way this is organised, I'd like to change the way my staff are organised. And then we have to change the committees to reflect that.
I'm just thinking back to our very first council meeting and what the town clerk told us about the changes we made that night. And how many people currently are arguing for those changes that night and now sat here telling me that we shouldn't make them this night. I think Peter was next, followed by... That's not, obviously you weren't here at the time, going. So,
yeah. At the risk of falling out with our new town clerk who's not even appointed yet, I do want to point out that several times this evening already, people have referred to our town clerk as our leader, and that is incorrect. It's absolutely incorrect.
It's being
our leader is sat there.
Don't worry, it's being noted.
Our town clerk is there to advise us and to help us deliver on the aspirations of the council.
If I may, as a point of information, I did not suggest, or I hope I didn't suggest, that the town clerk was in any way a leader in terms of policy or a leader in terms of setting an agenda. But the town clerk is the leader of the staff, the head of the staff, the chief cheese, if you like. And if I were in that role, I would like some input into the way that my organisation is structured. Not as to what it delivers.
What, do you want to stand up or sit down, Kevin, maybe?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to correct that point.
Right, okay, well,
please don't interrupt each other. We're going to get the public participation in a minute, and that's likely to be even more likely. So, we set the correct example. Peter, carry on.
Right, so to complete the point that I was trying to make, and I think this is something that we haven't been strong enough, if I'm honest with ourselves as a group, I don't think we've provided particularly strong leadership over the duration of this council so far. And I think we could improve on that. The committee structure, as it's proposed, is not something that a few people in the back room have dreamed up. It's come from the staff themselves that have been very unhappy with their ability to communicate with the councillors and to invigorate the councillors in the way that they feel they ought to be. So for us to get into a semantic argument about who's leading us and hold off is absolutely wrong. It's up to us, sat around this table, to make that structure and agree it. And I think that it's a very sensible. There are some things that are missing, in my opinion. I don't think, and I did mention this to the acting town clerk, that I felt there wasn't room in there for sufficient scrutiny and support for the financial operations of the council. But otherwise, I feel happy that we ought to be supporting our staff who have looked very carefully at how they operate and how they wish to interact with us as councillors, and I can't disagree with wanting to get it better and to give us the opportunity to demonstrate more leadership to our staff.
Steve, you were next, I think, and then Shan.
I just listened to Councillor Roy, and I was thinking back to that first meeting that you mentioned, and I recall that Councillor Roy was so keen to push this through. Asked people to think, to take time, to decide about whether changes were worth making, and review things and the rest. And I do seem to recall that actually councillors did take notice of that argument. Councillor Roy also said that we shouldn't get involved in a semantic argument about who's a leader and not a leader and the rest, and yet Councillor Roy actually introduced that semantic argument into the debate.
Sorry, point of order, that's not correct. Other councillors did before me and I was correcting them.
You might well be right on that.
That was a wise decision. Carry on.
You might well be right. I have profound problems with us instigating a structural review of any sort without a new clerk in place. Not because they're a leader or not a leader, but because I don't think it's appropriate. And yet at the same time, there's a lot of good sense in what is outlined in these suggestions. I can absolutely understand the reason for wanting to review what needs to be done and how to manage things and the rest, and to be more effective on many levels. But I really do think we should defer this, because as it stands, because I feel so strongly that the new clerk should be in place in order to be fully involved in any restructuring conversations that occur with management and with the people that actually make the decisions, us at this table. I don't want to be in a position of voting against this proposal and it's being kicked down the road. I would just like it to be deferred, if possible.
Yeah.
Sean, I think.
Yeah, I was going to suggest a deferral of this one. It does feel quite uncomfortable that this kind of hit the table cold in staffing, and I didn't feel comfortable with it in that meeting and then had to leave before it was voted upon, but I wouldn't have voted to recommend this to full council personally. We're in the middle of a HR review, which is like pending, the outcomes of that and those kind of conversations we've had with professionals about structure and about interactions and communications, I think are really, really integral to be fed into a potential new restructure. And as Steve said, the bones of it are great. Like, I don't have a massive problem with ideas that come forward which will make things better. I just have a bit of quite a lot of a problem with the timing, basically, and I just would really love us to integrate the outcome of that HR review alongside some oversight from the new town clerk into that process so that we can really unpack this properly. That is all I'm missing.
Okay. To the people that are advocating a deferral, I can see some sense of the argument. The one question I would ask, the town clerk, potential town clerk until 2008, won't be in position until August, so it won't be coming to an August agenda. We can't honestly expect her to sit down the first week and by Thursday be fully versed and ready for this. So we're looking at September at the very earliest. If we're waiting until the HR review is complete, we're probably going to be pushing towards Christmas. And we've had a report from our staff saying they won't get these projects done by the end of our term. There are good arguments for and against, but we risk kicking this so far down the road that by the time we do it, it won't have time to have any effect. Vicky.
I'm
No,
not,
sorry, Vicky did put her hand up and you did.
I might be looking at this a bit simply. We've just voted for staffing changes, and this second part is voting about how we as a council organise our committees.
Yes.
Now, from what I understand, when the whole new council, before I came on board, etc., they got rid of all the committees.
Yeah.
So,
Except planning.
yeah, except planning.
Against the advice
So,
of current clerk.
Yeah, so what is the difference between then and now?
No idea.
All we need to do at this moment is say, yes, we want to restructure into new committees, or no, we don't. Or am I being too black and white today? If that's what I'm allowed to say black and white.
You probably weren't until the last comment. That, in its essence, boiled down to its simplest form, is the decision in front of us. Yeah. Philippa.
I've got a couple of issues with this. Because one, we're not just agreeing the new committees, we've actually got a staffing structure that sits in the same discussion with that. Now, the staff may tell us that that's how it's operating at the moment, but if we vote for that today, we in effect crystallise that for 6 months, because that's part of our standing orders, that if you vote for something, then you can't reverse it within 6 months. So what we're saying about is that that staffing structure, not the committees, but the staffing structure has to stay that way for 6 months, unless we have another vote on it.
Sorry, there is a point of order, Philip, but you can reverse a motion within 6 months with a mechanism called a notice of motion.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we would have to do is then to bring this back to another full council with another structure. So that to me seems extraordinarily messy. The second part is about the committees. Now, the committees, there's no terms of reference for these committees, so we're not clear what each committee is actually, what the composition of each committee and what the responsibilities of each committee is. That hasn't been provided. The people who are chairing and vice chairing the current committees haven't, as far as I'm aware, actually even been consulted. So we are saying that we as councillors have got the final say in committees and all the rest of it, but none of us have actually been consulted on this proposal prior to it coming here. So
Staffing.
I was going to say, the staffing committee meeting, which went
With
on
the only
for
chair,
a very
the only
long time, we did run through all of that.
well, and I voted against it because I
Well,
don't think
disagreeing
I
with it
have been
doesn't mean it
committed.
didn't happen.
I don't think I have been consulted. I think that there's issues.
Tom, point of order, carry on.
Point of order, standing order 28.1. All are part of a standing order except one that incorporates mandatory statutory requirements may be suspended by resolution in relation to the consideration of an item on the agenda for a meeting, in which case you don't have to wait 6 months. This is something you can do at a meeting.
Yeah.
What I would say is that I think that there needs to be more consideration about these committees and about what their terms of reference are, what their span of responsibilities are, and I certainly don't think that we should be tying the committees to a staffing structure, which we could again be changing apparently at will, or certainly within 6 months. I just think it's wrong.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, exactly.
I just want to say, there was obviously an opportunity to consult with the staff at the staffing committee, of which 4 and then 3 of the councillors of the 9 on the committee attended. I'd also like to say that I currently have a member of staff delivering a £350,000 project with nobody to report to. And unless this is resolved soon, and as the point has been made, we won't necessarily have this agreed in August, that's almost to the end of the project without having somebody to report to. Thank you.
Kelly was next and then Sean.
It is deeply regrettable and very, very wrong that there wasn't a facility whereby the projects department, the projects manager, how the corporate governance, whatever it's called, that person should have had a committee to report to. And I think that person could have suggested that they report to the Oversight Committee, and the Oversight Committee would have been okay with that. So I think there's a little bit of, well, we didn't have nobody to talk to. Well, maybe try a bit hard and shout a bit louder, because I do, you know, I've got ears, I do listen. So I don't want to make this a battle between the staff and the councillors, or the staff of the oversight committee. The structure through which people report is less important than the fact that they are reporting, and is less important than the fact that there are channels of communication. And channels of communication can be opened without changing the committee structure. We can invite the projects manager to come to the next oversight committee, which I think is very soon, if it still exists. So I would say that creating channels of communication is more important than creating structure. So I would put out a request for all the managers to come along to oversight and put their points of view at the next oversight committee, and in the meantime put the structural changes in abeyance until we've had input from the town clerk, who will undoubtedly have a view about the structure of the organisation and will have a leadership role amongst the staff.
To be honest, those 4 managers made the report last week to staffing and nobody turned up.
Excuse me.
I'm not saying they weren't up, justified reasons for not being there.
It makes it sound like we're just going to be bothered.
Yeah.
No, I'm not, I'm
That's
just stating the fact that that wasn't intended to be offensive at all. But it's a staffing committee meeting, and staff report to the staffing committee. You know, everybody had the opportunity to come. I don't make every meeting, and I don't judge anybody that doesn't come. I was just responding directly to Kevin's point that the staff now come and make the same 2-hour presentation to another committee.
I would say.
You know, we don't want to get into an argument here, but they have just given us their feelings in a very strong way. And oversight is open, and oversight is live, you know, to the public. It's not the best place, in my mind, to discuss key, important staffing concerns and relationships with councillors. I mean, maybe you do want that blown out across the town. Personally, I wouldn't. Sean?
Yes, just to be clear, I don't believe what Kevin was saying when he said that staff could report to oversight was about kind of airing staffing concerns. I think it's more about communication and like communicating those projects evenly with oversight, which is literally what the point of that committee was about. So I think that might have been a point of misunderstanding. Additionally, a 4:30 meeting, I was late to it and then had to leave early. It's a really difficult time for people that work and have children and kind of carrying responsibilities. The fact that currently councillors are unable to make certain timed meetings is almost an argument why we need to be thinking a bit more clearly about this and have literally more oversight and a little bit more headway with this before we decide on a change. Because if we can't staff those committees as councillors, we're completely ineffective and we won't be corporate anyway. So I do think that it's really important that those kind of things are taken into account as, you know, it's about communication between staff and councillors, but it's about making the best way of working with those 2 groups of people. You know, there are lots of overlaps and I think those connections need to be made stronger rather than being driven by kind of problematic discourse.
That was kind of the idea behind the restructuring of it and making 4 smaller, more dynamic, more agile committees that don't need 12 councillors. If you've got 6 people who can meet once every 6 weeks and drill down into some very specific topics, that should be a lot easier to arrange than our current setup. That was the entire idea behind it, was so that each department would have a small agile committee that could really drill down into the detail and build those relationships, and you wouldn't have the problem we've got at the moment of quite large, cumbersome committees struggling to get people around the table at the same time, because we all have different lives to lead. I totally get that. I've got 3 kids as well, you know. And some, like I said to Jackie, I missed meetings. I missed planning yesterday, for example, because I simply couldn't be there. And this was an attempt to sort of like realign ourselves with the staff. So that's kind of the reason for the suggestions. Frankie, and then Jackie.
Just really to Kevin, I'd like to introduce myself because I don't think we've actually met yet.
We haven't, no.
Um,
And that's my fault.
That's fine. My point just around that we don't try hard enough to make it to meetings. I think we've been asking for 2 years for this to be reviewed because we said from the outset that it wouldn't provide us with the lines of communications that we needed. So we spent the last 2 years asking for things to be reviewed.
Jackie, then Peter. I can't remember, just go Jackie, then
I
Peter.
wasn't aware of that, but and again, I just want to reiterate really just that I don't have a problem with change, and I don't have a problem with what's being proposed. I just do have a massive problem with the timing. But it has to be this month
When would you want to do it?
after the 1st of August, when
So
we
first
or when we can have a chance to. The staff, I just want to say, the staffing meeting that was proposed was about resources, and had I known it was going to be about all of this, I would have asked that it was not on a day when I couldn't make it. I would have asked for it to be when more people could attend. It's just.
Peter.
So I'm going to say something really unpopular. Right. The law tells us that councillors have to be in a room to make decisions. We can't do it online, we can't do it any other way. And I know when I went through COVID as a councillor, when we were allowed to make decisions online, and it was quite handy, to be quite honest. I could nip upstairs into my office and take part in a meeting and make the votes, fine. But anyway, the situation is we cannot do that. And the unpopular part of this, and I've got to say, is if we're unable as councillors to make those meetings, then perhaps we should be really considering whether or not we have the capacity to be a councillor in the first place. And I'm sorry if that is unpopular.
You'll end up with one demographic. Where's the diversity? Where's the...
Well, I'm just saying the truth.
Yeah.
Right,
So I know that might be unpopular, but it's just the truth, isn't it? Sorry.
It's not true.
Alright, we're getting a little bit.
Sorry, I just want
Let
to
Peter finish his point.
finish off the point here. And this almost feels like Groundhog Day. It feels like we're having the first council meeting that we had 2 years ago, in a similar way. And I remember being on the group of councillors that said, be careful what you wish for here, because if you do away with the committee structure, we might end up with a situation where it's very difficult for us as councillors to really grasp the business of the council and to give the support that the council officers need. 2 years later, the council officers are telling us that. Why we're resisting it, I do not know.
Kevin.
I'm not resisting the request, the reasonable request to the officers. There has obviously been a massive information filter, obviously, because I sat in every single oversight committee and every single full council since I was co-opted onto this body. And ironically, the only meeting that I couldn't attend since I've been co-opted was this most recent staffing committee because I was busy helping old people go to bed. But that's a by the by. I wasn't there, I should have been. I would have taken the time off had I realised how significant this staffing committee meeting was going to be. I am deeply sorry. I will send my personal apologies to all the senior team of the council that I did not understand, I was not made aware. No manager sat around this table and told the Oversight Committee in plain terms that everybody could understand that they needed extra resources and they needed more granular management. Not one single time. In fact, the opposite was true. We were suggesting additional resources and there was a reluctance to put those additional resources in place. I believe that to be the case. We can go back through minutes and assess it otherwise. I don't want to be this horrible person who doesn't get on with the staff. I would really like a structure that suits the staff, and I think we will work better as an authority if there are better channels of communication, which there obviously haven't been recently. But I still believe that there is a person that we haven't yet appointed officially, who should have a significant input into this, and I am reluctant to tie that person's hands to a structure that they might not like. And they might have some excellent ideas as to how the structure can be made better. If it's about communication, let's open, it's 2 committees, it's 2 sittings of the Oversight Committee, if that. Let us open the door of the Oversight Committee to anything from anybody that wants to come in front of that committee, and then wait 2 committee cycles at maximum for the opinion of the new town clerk on structure moving forward.
What would be the date of that?
Well,
July.
Sorry?
It would take it through to the September full council meeting. Well, that will, if you want it to be a proposal, if that can be made into a proposal.
I'll second that.
No, you can't.
It can't be, because that's not what we're discussing. We're here to either accept, reject or defer this recommendation.
Yeah,
Well,
this is the thing.
defer to the September meeting.
I second that.
Okay. Let's vote on it. All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What? Sorry?
Against parents?
Against? Abstain? There we go. Go for it, mate.
Mayor,
Mate.
I'm not going to argue the point of what's just been done. I just want to put a clarification over that. I know it's been said that nothing is being presented to committees previously about staffing structure and the staffing levels and things like that. You know, those who know my reports are all very positive anyway. I have acted in a timely manner from the back of the Lit Fest, and which has made me then propose this new structure for my team particularly. And likewise, on the back of that, the management team have got together and looked at everything as a whole. So with you saying we've not presented that to committee, you're right, but we have acted timely straight away as soon as we felt that something needed to be done. And it's not that we haven't done it and we haven't done it in the past, it's because we needed to do it now, based on the information and how the staff are, how the staff welfare is. So it's not a case of not, and we haven't. We have, as soon as we had addressed there is a major issue to deal with.
Thanks, mate. Right. Should have put this one as number 4. Formally appoint Tatiana Camp as the new town clerk and proper officer of the council.
It's just to note, it's not a yes or no, it's just to note.
I know. I've noted it. Has everybody noted it? Noted. Right, here we go. Correspondence received.
Well, I mean, everyone's hopefully had these papers, so it's really just if there's any questions on the correspondence, we'll go through it now.
I mean, the only comment I was going to add was obviously the Abbey of House. I assume everybody read the big number at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peter, did you want to say anything about the Sound Brothers correspondence? You may have that coming up.
Sorry, I was just reading an email.
You carry on. You don't need to, everyone's seen it.
Well, I think if everybody's seen the correspondence regarding the sound house, I'm sure everybody's aware that there's been metal railings put effectively blocking pedestrian access to somebody's beach from the south side of the river. It's regrettable on my part, but I took one of the council officers up there to demonstrate how bad the services was and how urgent the need of repair is. And she saw somebody trip over in front of her and said, "We're closing this, sorry." That was what led to that. I am assured, however, there's funding in place to make the repairs that will be happening towards the end of this year. but more detail needs to be worked through, because obviously it's a heritage surface with the rails. We can't just concrete over them as had previously been proposed. So there's a more sensitive treatment coming forward. I'm not exactly aware of what it is yet. I'll tell you when I am.
Stay standing up. Opportunity for choral councillors present to discuss choral council issues relevant to the SDC.
Well, I may wish to defer
No,
to
no,
Councillor
no.
Tilby.
As you pointed out, I am in charge.
Oh,
Why not? Okay, I shall have to open my little black book.
Yeah.
Right, bearing in mind that the meeting's gone on quite a long way already, I wrote down 3 pages of this, so I'll rattle through it as quick as I can. Right. So we've had another long dry period in the last couple of months leading up to on the 25th of June, extraction from the River Neat in order to fill the canal was stopped. And that's in accordance with the Environment Agency's requirements that effectively 50% of the flowing water is the maximum that can be taken to put into the canal, and effectively if the river Neat goes below, I think effectively the weir level, it can't then be used to top the canal up. The knock-on effect of that is because every time we operate the lock gates, we have a loss of water, so the harbour now is effectively closed. And what I was just reading on my phone was a message from the harbour master, because I did check in with him earlier on today and asked if the locks were still out of operation, because we have had quite a lot of rain in the last few days. And he's put the notice still stands at present as the water levels are up and down. I did use the current flash rain and water level rise to flush the lock through yesterday, but the levels have apparently already dropped again this morning. So at the moment the harbour is still effectively closed to lock-ins, which is rather sad because it's the time of year where it's nice to welcome visitors to view through our historic canal. On the 12th of June we had our inaugural community area partnership meetings, which replaced the community area network. Councillor Lorraine Corrigan-Turner was there, as was Councillor Tilby and Councillor Chopak. We had what you'd call perhaps a normalisation meeting where we got together, and bearing in mind that our community area network is now much wider. It now goes down and includes Culford. There's some quite different views going on, and it was quite interesting to the way the Cornwall Council ran it, to take the temperature, if you like, of the tables of different councillors from the parishes. I missed out.
That's okay, no offence to you.
Tom was there as well. I do apologise, Tom. I've just remembered. But anyway, it appears that one of the main tasks of the community area partnerships initially is going to be about working with funding and community levelling up funds. And I've mentioned these several times at previous councils. There is money and granting coming forward from central government into Cornwall, and then Cornwall Council are then devolving it into communities. And there's not much, in fact hardly any applications coming from our part of the world. I know that our housing, Ian Mason put forward a grant which was accepted, but that's I think pretty much the only one. And I should say that Camelford are busy putting in grant applications and being successful, because they are on a first come first served basis. So I will be talking to the acting town clerk again and making sure that we disseminate the information as much as possible, but small community groups can access a fair sum of money, which is going up in the next year, but it has to be spent by 2025. I also should say that Chris Sims, our community link officer, is now being moved away into a different community area, and we have a new community link officer who's called Sarah Bull. She is visiting on the 21st of July, and I hope to bring her into the council offices to introduce her to the staff, but I will let them know the date beforehand as well. And I'm going to walk around all the projects and things that we've got going on in view here in a minute. The heads of terms agreements for the skate park and the adjacent land that Cornwall Council own to be devolved to the Town Council should have been issued to the Town Council officers today. I'm seeing a nod to my right hand side, that's good. So this has taken us probably somewhere in the region of 5 years to get to, so it's quite a momentous day to get this far. I should say, one of the early conversations we had about the skate park was, do we just improve what we've got, or do we go crazy and make a world-class facility, something really special, the best skate park in the southwest? I have had that conversation with the mayor, and I believe, support from him. And there is another parcel of land which could be made available to us, which is on the Oversville car park at Crooklets. There was concern amongst council officers and our own staff that if we started to investigate that alternative site, that it may stop us on the current devolution of the current site. But what I've done is I've managed to open a conversation with Cornwall Council officers to say, we'll carry on with plan as it is to take the skate park and the adjacent land, and we can work that up as we see fit. However, we've got an open door to talk to them about the bigger site and the potential world-class facility if we wish to. And I'm not talking about this as a next year project, I'm talking about something 3 to 5 years down the line. Okay, but I think if we start thinking about it now, that'll be a really good position for us to be in. We have another by-election on the Town Council, which is coming up on the 27th of July, and it's a noteworthy election, and the reason for this is it's the first election in Bude that will require voters to show photo ID. And this is something which we really need to make very, very obvious to everyone that intends or wishes to come down and vote. And I know the Cornwall Council are going to be doing some public relations work on this, and I imagine that we're going to be asked to join in with that as well. On highways issues, crooklets and somebody's presence, I've been having quite a lot of conversations with local residents about the management of overnight parking of camper vans, and some of the areas where the dotted white parking bays have gone in and the seasonal restrictions. I've met with residents, I believe we've come to a good alternative that everyone can be happy with, and those are going to be included on the next rounds of the normalisation procedure where it goes through the regularisation process so that the traffic enforcement officers can actually put tickets on cars, because at the moment they actually can't. On the 21st of June, I had a meeting at Stratton Hospital with Councillor Tilbury, Councillor Chopak and Councillor Lorraine Corrigan-Tenner. I will let Sean talk about that, because that was a really interesting meeting. I met also on the 25th of June with the Berries, or an emergent Berries Avenue Action Group, which Councillor Purchase, I think, actually promoted into existence. Now, and I've got some lovely follow-ups with them. It looks like we're going to be able to do something with the play park, and it looks like we're going to be able to do something with their desire to have more hands-on management of the planting and the use of the grassy and green areas in and around Berries Avenue Estate. 26th of June, we had the Chatter Bus in the present car park, which where we talked about public transport services. It was really well attended. We had lots of people there. The lessons that I learned from that is that the users of our local town services love them and use them a lot. But there were lots of questions about connections to Barnstable and Plymouth in particular, where people were saying that they couldn't access healthcare services, and I absolutely understand that. And there was also a lot of concern shown about the connection and the value of the connection between Bude and Oakhampton to proceed onwards to Exeter. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the dog warden, so I've had lots of complaints about dogs on beaches and dogs doing their business where they shouldn't, so I'm going to hopefully do a little bit of PR myself on my own social media and be out and about, telling people to get their dogs off the beach or whatever they might be doing, or kindly educating them perhaps is the way we'll be doing it. That's my business. I wanted to say a few words about the flag issue and what had hit this council in not only the national press but the international press. But the Mayor said it so eloquently, I couldn't embellish any further what he said, and I wholeheartedly support you. Thank you for your words. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, just about a little item on the agenda regarding community land trusts, etc. I see Common Council are doing a lot of, there's been a lot on social media about Common Council involvement with community land trusts and houses. I see down at some place I've never heard of, Great Room. I'm just slightly concerned. I did ask the question but didn't get a reply. Are these houses, if Common Council are involved, are these houses protected from the right to buy scheme?
Honest answer is I don't know,
Okay.
but I would be highly surprised if they weren't, if that's the right way of putting it. If it goes into a community land trust, it's a separate management company. I suspect it's Cornwall Community Land Trust supported by Cornwall Council.
Yeah, as long as it comes.
I don't think they'll be subject to the right to buy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for asking me to say a little bit to you. Firstly, I'd like to offer Nikki Cabot's apologies. She's on holiday at the moment, so that's why she's not received. Not sure if I should declare interest in item 13, which Councillor Sullivan is going to bring forward, because I'm a founding member and a board member of the North Kernow Community Land Trust. I don't think there's anything on that item that's going to cause me issues. Sorry.
But I'm glad to hear that there is something that's coming in that we hear, because the wording, sorry to interrupt, but the wording I put forward is, as I said to you, was kind of, for discussion, wasn't, I expected.
You're not planning on saying anything that was written up?
No, absolutely not, never. But the wording might, I'm so pleased that there is somebody who might be able to give us advice on the wording.
Okay, thank you. Peter referred to the CAP meeting that we attended. There's something that we really need to focus on because of the funding situation. We need to set up a funding group which is made up of one divisional member from the Chelmsford side and one from this side, and perhaps a member from the town council and the parish councillor. So we really need to get that in place so that we can actually be productive in making these applications. Peter referred to the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is 1.2 million, which expires on the 23rd March 25. There is a Community Capacity Fund, which enables us to look at projects, so that we need to employ professionals to help with the application. There's funds available between £200,000 and £25,000 for that, so don't be put off that you're going to have to pay professionals to help you with your grant funding. Again, Peter referred to the meeting that we had at Stratton Hospital. This is a meeting that Nicky Chopak, who's our chair of Cross-Border Health Committee, has been trying to get together for some time to try and find out exactly what's happening at the MIU at Stratton. There's various members made up of community groups such as ourselves, the two councillors mentioned earlier. Also in attendance were several important senior members from the NHS, especially the Cornwall Hospital Trust, Kate Shields and Tamsin Anderson. Also, David Parsons, which you all know, who's I'm not sure if he's chair or vice chair now, of the Stratton Hospital Friends of Stratton Hospital. He was also in attendance. And we've asked him to set up a working party to ease the community side of things, how we can maintain that this important feature of our hospital side of things is maintained. At the moment, there's no plans for it to be altered in terms of the opening hours, etc., which was quite pleasing to see. It's good that we've got a good working relationship with all members that attended that meeting, which you there weren't. No. Were. Right, sorry. So we've got the same vision going forward on that aspect. I will be talking to Andy Parsons because out of the ONS committee meeting that I attended yesterday at Truro, which was the Health and Social Care OBS committee, it was mentioned about community hubs, which is made up of various community organisations, mainly voluntary organisations, to try and signpost people into certain directions if they've got mental health issues, etc. This community hub, so it's made up of volunteers mainly, but there is a telephone number that is open from 8 AM in the morning to 8 PM in the evening for 7 days a week. So that's something I need to work with Andy on to make sure that we're getting support from Cornwall Council on that particular issue. The last thing is that I'm attending in Plymouth tomorrow the Devon Cornwall Police Crime Panel, so if there's anything anybody wishes to raise on police matters, we'll see you at the meeting. Thank you, Stan.
We're going to move to public participation. I'm going to remind everybody to choose your words very carefully. We do not want this turning into a bonfire. In fact, I won't let it turn into a bonfire, given what's been reported in the media being broadcast now. Any evidence to suggest we're heading in that direction, I will very swiftly bring it to conclusion. I didn't know your name was gone, sorry. Would you like to say anything?
No, I wouldn't, thank you. Leslie Morris.
That's that. Anything? I'm just going to work my way down the line if it's all right. Richard?
Yeah, two things, if I may.
You may.
I was astonished to hear that there is a £350,000 budget for the head of the department and nobody to report to. I find that astonishing in a project that's got so many experts that have been attached to it. What you can do about that, I have no idea, but something needs to be done.
I was a little bit surprised myself.
Now, what I will say about that is, I don't know who the head of that department is, I don't know what their remit is, and the question that I have in relation to that relates to the orientation of the thing. Because I will only say that I have it on, I'm going to say expert authority, that the orientation has been tweaked at a whim, I should say. And if I can find out a little bit more about that through official channels, I don't know what the official channels are, but I would quite like to ask some questions.
Because it involves staffing, I'm not going to give a direct answer to that now, because I don't know how far I can go with it. I'll hand over to Peter.
So there was a working group of councillors that the project manager reported to, and at the instigation of the project, the outset of the project, that group met several times over. But once the project was up and running satisfactorily, I don't recall the last time, if I'm fair, that steering group met. However, as the Cornwall councillor, and the councillor who probably has, I don't want to claim the most interest, but a lot of interest in the project, I have been stuck to the project manager's side more than that project manager would probably like me to. The orientation of the structure, I've been told, is exactly the same as it is now.
As the existing.
As existing.
Okay.
Now, have you got evidence to challenge that?
Shall we say,
I would say no.
received information. I received information from what we got as a very good source that a tweak was made. Now, I haven't actually been there with my own equipment at the moment to check that. It won't compare with the official stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Although having said that, a long time ago now, my equipment did give a result within 0.1 of a degree, according to the British Geological Survey. But, having had a look, I am kind of concerned that it is perhaps being tweaked to be more of a tourist attraction than a historically accurate item.
So, the orientation,
Yeah.
I'll repeat,
Yes,
I've been assured
yeah.
that it's exactly the same as the current structure,
Yeah.
but moved to its new position. Obviously, you lose the straight westward views from the west sea-facing windows. You're now looking at the ground rising up to Compass Point,
Yeah.
Because Compass Point is the land rather than the structure itself, which I'm sure you know. The other windows will have views out over the breakwater and were considered, not on a whim, but to be appropriate in line with the intent of the structure, which was to observe the harbour and signal back towards harbour users on slightly lower ground and to the shipping, whether or not it was safe to enter or exit the harbour. So I feel personally reassured that those decisions weren't taken on a whim, they were taken with the best evidence and the best interests of the town and the structure at heart.
Thank you for a very careful answer.
Right.
Just quickly, can I just correct the record? I'm sorry if I may have given the wrong impression. In the context in which I said that the member of staff had no one to report to, we were talking about the committees, and there wasn't a specific committee to which that member of staff could report to. Not a person, not least me as acting town clerk. I would hope that member of staff reports to me as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2.
Where you go.
Thank you. Basically, I would just like, as a, I think, interested member to the public, to thank the Mayor for his speech this evening.
Yes.
I have taken some interest in it. I have spoken to a fair selection of parties because of my interest in this town, everybody in this town. And I thought the reports in the press were an utter disgrace, quite frankly. My view is that if you cannot win an argument by telling the truth, you have lost that
You're
argument.
Nigel Farage.
And I have to say, I did find it disingenuous and rather upsetting that the ex-deputy mayor did not declare his directorship of Pride in the article that he was rather mentioned. I think that was rather
It was
disingenuous.
one of many things that could have been put into
Yeah.
context, but
Apart
was
from
not.
that,
And I'm not going to go any further.
Yeah.
Chris,
Mr. Mayor.
it's the first time you've called me that.
Well, you know, he wants
You've got
something.
to,
Yeah.
I like to be formal sometimes. I'm just going to give you some information, then I'll have a question. As you know, this Saturday is the 200th anniversary of the canal starting the trade between Bude and Holsworthy. And like we're now the barge workshop is open on Sunday afternoons and will be till the last Sunday in September. However, it is quite likely for that on Heritage Day it will not be open. I can't do anything about that. My trustees and helpers are volunteers, and I actually need them to be in the Park House Hall at Alder Potter Pool assisting with that. We are having our celebration event of this 200th anniversary on the 22nd of the month at the White Hart Hotel. Now, also, in October, on the 7th and the 21st, we're organising visits to various parts of the canal. There is free transport. There is free transport, and there will be a lunch break at the Red Post Inn. But if you wish to come, then you need to book. Booking forms should be available from our website, or if you're really interested, I can let you have some in due course. Next Tuesday, I'm having a question and answer session with some pupils at Housefully Primary School, which I'm not sure which age group it is, because I have met the deputy head and she said she would tell me, she hasn't yet. So it could be Littleys who did come and visit the canal, or it could be the older ones. I'm hoping that it's the older ones, because they will ask me something that will really make me think, and so I'm quite looking forward to that. Now I have a question. This is a question. The new light structure is now over 20 years old, 22 years old, maybe a little bit more than that. It obviously needs some refurbishment, and it's looking a bit sorry for itself. And is the actual light structure checked for safety? Because it's made of concrete.
I would like to think so, but I don't do it personally.
That's a question we can check with the
We
facilities
will
manager.
have to check that with the facilities manager and try and give an answer, Chris.
Yes, could I have that in writing?
Of course. I'll hand
Not,
it
not,
over.
not an email.
No, I'll take it
Well,
to
the
your house.
answer is writing on the fact that we're going to ask the question.
And can I just say, what you said earlier is most appropriate.
Thank you.
I mean, you don't know what people think. And I've got a friend, I've had a friend for years and years, and he says really strange and upsetting things to me sometimes. And I say to him, what you think is what you think. For God's sake, keep your mouth shut.
It's a very good piece of advice. Paul?
2 points, please, Mr. Mayor. One point is on the skate park, which I know is quite close to your brief. I came to a presentation here a couple of weeks ago by the Bude Climate Partnership and saw some rather scary looking projections.
Yeah.
And one of the things that scared me the most was we're going ahead with maybe spending a lot of money on a new skate park that will be underwater in maybe 25 years, if their projections are anything like correct. I know they're talking about mitigation and everything, but it seems it might be interesting to follow up Councillor LeBoy's suggestion for that very reason, because that is starting to go back up the hill.
We have got a report due shortly which takes that into consideration with a suggestion.
Well, right, okay. Second point.
When I say shortly, I mean it's having two points on the agenda after this finishes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't make that clear.
I wasn't able to turn over the councillor's paper.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's item 12 or 11 actually, and we're on 8. So.
And to ask Councillor Boyd, he said that he'd been in contact with the Harbour Master and the canal and the Environment Agency about the water in the river. Well, and the weir. Well, the weir's not up. The weir hasn't been up for a while.
Doesn't mean that one.
Hillbridge.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm talking about the weir down here. If they lifted the weir up, it would stop, it would hold back the water. We'd have more water able to go in the canal. Suits
the Strand, because you don't have a, shall we say, every 12 hours something smelly. You have watering, which a lot of people like. The fire brigade like it because they can then access water if the Strand, anywhere on the Strand goes up. So why can't that be done? It's stuck.
Right. So, in my reply, I want to say I fulsomely support your point of view. The previous council, and I don't like using those words because I always get held to account for them, spent an awful lot of time trying to persuade Cornwall Council to raise the weir so that the river could effectively be in water. But there are two fundamental concerns that we couldn't resolve. One of which was some environmental challenges, because it's now become a fish pass and fish are freely flowing up and down the water, which you'll see later in the summer. There's lots of the freshwater, I forget what they're called, but there's normally loads of them in there. The other one of which was effectively to hold a body of water back in front of a working harbour was deemed to be unacceptable by the Harbours Authority.
It's not a working harbour, is it? Not at the moment.
Well, it's
You said it's a blockade.
well, this week it is still considered a working harbour. The other third consideration was that weir has to, at some point, somebody has to take a decision and pull a switch. And it was very difficult to find a responsible authority that was prepared to take that responsibility on. So for all those reasons, it failed, and I think Mr. Jewell might have something further to add.
Yeah, my understanding is that if you wanted to have a weir that carried water back, the equipment that is there is defunct, as is the weir. It just wouldn't work. And of course, Southwest Water, I suppose it is it on it? Or is it?
Possibly EA.
Yeah, EA, well, they haven't got any money, have they? So, you know, it's dead though. And I think it looks better the way it is.
Just on a point of information, there was a meeting, I believe, if memory serves me correct, in 2004 in the wake of the Boscastle flood, a meeting between the boat owners, the EA, Cornwall Council, North Cornwall District Council at the time, and that meeting decided that the weir would remain forevermore down, basically because of the request from the boat owners. The thought at the time was dropping the weir in a heavy rain event caused a surge of water down through and sunk some boats that would not otherwise have been sunk, and that, you know, the ship has sailed as far as the weir is concerned way back when, I'm afraid.
Okay. I don't know your name, Mr. Paul. Do you have a comment you'd like to make?
No, I just thought I'd come along and see how the council worked.
Quite sure.
For all the wrong reasons, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
No, just here to listen, thank you.
Sally?
Here to observe.
Yeah, actually, just before you go, mate, choose your words carefully.
I ain't talking about this lot. That consultation that blowing woman's trying to sort of.
Words carefully, Darcy.
Was the biggest con out again, wasn't it? She hid two little girls away.
Are we talking about, sorry, the county consultation?
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
Consultation. Well, she had two little girls away at Nanny Woods Bridge where most people don't go anyway, and they put two up at Morrison's and tea time one, and they do it in the morning when most of the local people go shopping.
Maybe you thought most of the local people were working. Honestly, I can't really judge what other people did.
But when most women go shopping, drop the kids to school and go shopping.
Right, Ian, go for it before I remind you.
And all those questions were so loaded, it was Unbelievable.
Okay, Jackie, Ian is going to respond.
Just to say, Mr. James, as I said, I think a few meetings ago, that all views will be taken on board, including those that you gave to the women that were undertaking the consultation. And we did find actually that being based where the market is by Nanny Moore's Bridge, there was quite a considerable flow of people, and we got. I think it remains to be said that the organisation that the council has contracted to undertake the consultation said that it was one of the most successful they've undertaken, and they've worked for the Scottish Government and the Welsh Government. So they're no small outfit, and it has been quite successful, and your views will be taken on board.
It was a totally loaded thing, wasn't it?
Okay.
And the other thing, talking about the weir, if the Brains to be had just left as it was with the old one, it would have been a perfect system.
Okay.
They only had to leave it as it was.
Okay.
You'd have had water all summer.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is John Bennett, and me and my wife are both disabled. My wife's got severe Parkinson's, and we live in Stratton. And we'd like to thank the council very much for supporting and looking after our store and our post office, because it's been brilliant. Because they deliver to us every week, bring food to our place, and they'll take any orders or anything. And it's not just Stratton. I have a friend that lives in Hoseley. He's an entrepreneur, and for years he used to bring all these parcels to Stratton Post Office. And then when they talked about closing it, I'm afraid he changed to Hoseley Post Office. But it's been a bloody, sorry swearing, but it's been a godsend. And thank the council very much.
So thank you very much for coming in and giving us some positive feedback.
Yeah.
It was a saviour, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for
Really.
making the effort.
Yeah.
It's common sense.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it was.
Thank you very much.
Come at 6 o'clock next time, Jan.
Darky, thank you. Right. To receive a proposal. Thank you. To receive a proposal from Cognition Learning to provide a summer programme of assistance in BSDC and approve the use of the budget for, sorry, smash.
I will take this one. Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Jan, check you.
Yes. Okay, go on.
I will crack on.
Yeah.
Time is pushing. Yes. Right. Yeah, of course. We'll just on. If you haven't yet had a chance to look at the background for this paper, whilst in the import here, whilst we go and ask the directors of Cognition CIC to come and attend, if you could possibly have a quick look at the background. It is quite a lengthy background. My apologies for writing quite so much, but it will fill in the discussion, and then hopefully we can expedite this a bit quickly. Okay, well, if they did, yeah, I'll give you the background there. Hopefully you've seen it. So, in 2022-23, the council set a budget of £20,000 towards community activity. A programme was delivered jointly by LJD Coaching and Cognition. It went down very well to all accounts. Consequently, council has allocated a further £20,000 for this current financial year to contribute towards similar programmes. Investigations were undertaken to see if the two organisations wish to deliver the programme again jointly. It transpired they didn't. Proposals were received by LJD Coaching and Cognition, and they were scrutinised by councillors. At the last full council meeting, it was decided that the proposal from LJD Coaching would be agreed, and previously presented at the full council meeting the 1st of June. That's the last one. Cognition was notified that its proposal might, at that point, be better positioned as a grant application. Paper was circulated at June's full council meeting, proposing an allocation of a maximum of £15,000. It's important to remember, maximum of £15,000 for the summer 2003 food programme for LJD Coaching for up to 1,000 children, and the town council resolved to do this. Cognition and hope that their proposal might also be discussed, and that is what we're discussing today. And just to quickly run through that, Bude-Stratton to discuss the way forward and to clarify their proposals, including checking whether they were logistically feasible. We looked at that. It was agreed that a summer 2023 holiday club proposal from Cognition would be considered at full council tonight. It was also agreed that Cognition CRC would apply to the Town Council's grant programme for a grant of 4,800 towards Summer of Steam Cognition Learning Programme, which they have subsequently done, but suffice to say a decision on that will be made after your decision tonight on this paper. We hope that either proposal to the full council or the grant application would be approved. So essentially tonight you have two options to decide upon at this meeting: to fund the summer 2023 holiday club proposal as detailed below, and I won't read it all, you don't want to hear me all night, or to not fund that proposal. And the details of the proposal are there.
I propose we approve the use of the budget. We're literally talking about either feeding kids or not feeding kids, so it's a no-brainer.
Second.
Before you take a vote, I'm duty bound just to draw your attention to the financial implications. So we have £20,000 that's been allocated with up to a maximum of £15,000 for LJD coaching to deliver the programme. Therefore, there remains £5,000 to allocate towards this programme. I think the request is for slightly more than that. If you're minded to approve, obviously there will have to be, to some extent, some vying across budgets.
Can I propose we take that £5,000 out of the budget and the 500 out of reserves, and then when we come to Christmas, we can cross that bridge and take out reserves if we need to. That added to the proposal.
You
You know what I mean?
still happy second? Yeah, okay, one in favour.
I think that's unanimous.
Still have to give?
Any against? So, no, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Receive the progress report on the campus on storm power and agree any associated actions.
Oh,
Keep going. You're welcome to stay if you so wish.
It's a really exciting stuff to go through.
thank you.
Thank you.
So I won't reread the entire report. Hopefully you'll have a chance to have a look at it. I'll just highlight a couple of things on there. First of all, the activity programme. So I suppose the key things that we've been working on is engagement with the schools, which has gone very successfully. This week we had New Haven students visit site, which the feedback was very good. And they enjoyed that very much. We have 3 work experience placements commencing on Monday. And once the summer term finishes, we'll then be moving our attention to the wider community. We're doing some things at Heritage Day, and also doing some guided tours and various other activities for the community as well, until we restart in September back again with all the schools. So it's all been really successful, and the engagement that we hoped for has been achieved. And yeah, so that's all really positive. In terms of the Capital Works programme, hopefully you can all visibly see that it's coming down. There are time-lapse cameras which have been installed now, so we're going to be issuing short clips every quarter to basically show the progress that's happened. For those of you that probably might not know, the roof was particularly troublesome. It was much denser concrete than we anticipated, so it took longer to dismantle, and obviously it hasn't been salvaged because it is just pure concrete and it's being replaced. The compass markings are now all removed and being safely stored off-site for us to review, so that will be taking place next week, where the decisions will be made on whether any of those need to be replaced. So we'll give you an update at that stage. The concrete ring beam which holds the tower together is now removed, so the building's got ratchet straps around it, which essentially is holding it together so it doesn't fall down. There is some substantial cracking on one side that wasn't evident until we took the roof off, and actually the building is in a lot worse condition than we really understood at the time. The site itself, obviously it's on the triple SI. Due to the really good weather, which we've been fortunate to up until this point, the grass on the site has fared really well, which was obviously the main concern from Natural England when they delayed the project. So that was really interesting to see that we haven't had as many issues as we thought. We've had generally good feedback and positive interaction from the public, particularly with the site and the contractors themselves, which has been really nice to see. Just in terms of issues, because obviously there are some, there always was going to be, unfortunately, the replacement stone and pointing have been tricky to replace. So the stone itself is no longer quarried anywhere, so we're having to source a different stone. And the pointing, the building was believed to have been constructed in lime mortar. It's actually done in sand and cement, which has led to a 3-week delay in deconstruction of the tower. So we're currently 3 weeks behind schedule. We had our project team meeting on Tuesday this week, where the site advised that they believe that they can catch up a week on the dismantle, which will leave us 2 weeks to then try and make up on the rebuild. We're still aiming for an October finish, because obviously once we get past that, the weather has obviously been implications on how things progress. In terms of financial cost, at this point, I can't give you any figures. We've made some savings elsewhere on the project to do with where we're sourcing steel from the roof. But that level of detail is something that's going to need to be discussed in the coming weeks and months, just because unfortunately if we remain behind schedule it will cost us more money than what we have set aside. I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously it's a very brief overview of what is a very complex and large project, but I'll do my best. If you have any questions, there is nothing to agree this evening. It's just purely an update.
Go on then, Jackie. But
I was actually...
Half the time there isn't anybody there doing anything. It's just like using it as a hospital job.
right, that's not a question, and that's the end of your turn.
Philippa, sorry.
I just wondered when you might have
No, it's not a hospital.
when you might have some more information about the financial situation. I suppose we need to be thinking potentially about where those extra funds are going to come from.
Yeah. So we have an interim kind of invoices issue. So the contractor invoices is on a sort of bi-monthly basis, and at that point the project team then reviews that in terms of what they said they've done against what's actually been done, and then the project team, so architect, quantity surveyor, project managers, then review that, and we go with a counter offer. So we've just done our second one of those, where we've made some savings. So we're hoping to use those savings to pull across. But that is something that we obviously will be keeping an eye on. I'm hoping that the next evaluation that comes through will then give us a more definitive understanding if there's a severe issue and a severe gap. It all depends on how the next few weeks go, because obviously the weather plays a huge role in the project, and there could be potentially more delays. So I can't give you a definitive figure right now.
In 2 months or something, maybe.
Hopefully before that. But obviously, I don't want to go over the ground again, but just to highlight the complexities of the projects that we undertake and why somehow we've got to find a better way of being able to communicate this, because this isn't really working particularly well at full council, I don't feel, and I don't feel you're getting the level of detail needed to be able to actually make informed decisions. So that's not for now then.
We've done that one.
Yeah, we've done that part. Yes.
It's not a question, so I'll hope you
Just
accept
keep it
it.
brief if it's a statement, please. Go on.
Just for people who are particularly interested in the compass point structure, I visited last Monday to have a chat with the guys working on it, and there were 2 things that I thought was interesting. The fact that it is actually been constructed with ordinary Portland cement is quite interesting, because ordinary Portland cement was only really invented 40 years previous to the point where it would have been used in that structure. So it was one of the first buildings, probably in Bude, that would have used that method of construction. And the other thing that was quite interesting is that above the carved compass point directional stones, there's effectively a decorative moulded frieze that went around. And the guys that are disassembling it weren't sure how it was constructed, but it was effectively moulded into the cement or concrete that the roof was constructed out of. And they're not quite sure how to replace that, but they've got a very accurate model of the cornicing. And they think rather than mould it in concrete again, they might actually get stone cut, which they think probably actually be cheaper than moulding it.
Okay, let's move on to one of you. Item 11, Frankie, again, to receive a progress report on the Wheel Sports Facility project and agree any associated actions.
Okay, again, very lengthy paper. Hopefully we'll have a chance to read it. I'm not going to read through the update again. I suppose positives to take from it are that our 3 funding applications have progressed onto actual application stage rather than just the expression of interest. And myself and Ian are working on those now. We're looking at a £500,000 budget, which is an increase on our original estimate, purely because of complexities, which takes me on to the actual paper where there are options to agree. Hopefully you're all aware of the transatlantic data cable that runs through the additional site, which is very close to the skate park. There were conversations with telecoms companies a while back who were positive in some respects, however put in some caveats, which are extremely expensive and legally have implications on us, as well as the project itself in terms of its ability to succeed. Firstly, the risk is enormous. It's classed as I think it's national cable of national.
Yes, it's an asset
of national importance. So because of that, the risk to us is enormous. So that would, the cost from an insurance perspective would be very high. We also then have the cost and risk for the contractor, who may or may not be willing to take on the project because of that. And then also the caveats that the cable companies have put in place, which essentially require a trench to be dug with steel plating and concrete to be poured over it, of which they will determine who the contractor is, which is obviously entirely out of our control and very expensive. On that basis, a few things have taken place. We've had conversations with Cornwall Council officers about alternative sites, which we've briefly touched upon. As Peter alluded to, we originally pushed back due to the encroachment and the land that they requested to use, and in the coming years, loss of revenue from car parks and things. So on that note, and mainly to ensure that the project maintains momentum, really, and that it's something we can actually deliver, I've put forward a proposal to you all, which essentially expands the site that we were originally looking at. My map was very battered, but if you do have a copy of it in front of you, the dark blue line is the original proposed site that was agreed by the council. If you were to take this paper and go forward with the option to approve, the additional site is this light blue line. So what we're essentially asking to do is create a greenbelt strip between the current park and the additional land that we already own. And what this will do is essentially prevent us from having to build at all within the exclusion zone of the cable, which will prevent lengthy legal battles, costs, risk, everything like that. It will also support our environmental plans to create a greener park and support greater biodiversity there. It also offers some additional seating and alternative things like that for the park. So what you'd essentially have is two sites. So the bottom park, which is being devolved of the site, and then this new area above the sort of green strip that we've created. The recent consultation that was undertaken with the user groups, which was very successful, supported this idea of having two separate sites. Essentially, you have a large user group who have a variety of users for this site and differing levels and ages and things. And they're essentially saying that it's very crowded. If you have scooters and skateboards in the same place, it causes problems. The ones that want to do more advanced things can't because of obviously younger or less experienced beginners, etc. So we're proposing that the lower site would be a more beginners area, sort of younger child-friendly site, but with a much safer car-free entrance to make it a little bit more suitable. And then on the new site, which is currently just grassland, we would create a brand new advanced park for
Intermediate to advanced
advanced users, and thus keeping everybody happy, at least trying to. So that's the proposal. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. We did map it out. What did we say it was? I can't remember now. So the land that we're sort of requesting in addition is no more than 1,000 metre squares of land, basically. This would keep.
Are we talking about you taking more of the dam?
Sorry.
The whole proposal to start.
Yeah, sorry, Chris, he hasn't finished. Just, yeah, you can ask a question in a minute.
Oh.
Let her finish.
So the proposal would, in one sense, yes, we're asking for an additional section of land, but one section of the dams that would have been built upon will not be built upon. So they should, in theory, negate each other in that respect. So it's a very small section that we're looking at adding to the site. To refer back to Peter's other suggestion of this additional site, which is further into the overflow car park at the back, obviously, if we decided to do that, there are implications to what we're currently doing now. So we can't submit funding applications within the next 3 weeks, which is when they're due, for a site that we don't own or doesn't exist. So if we get funding, it will be on this basis for this site. And that we can't necessarily then just pick it up and go, we're going to go over there instead. So there's lots to think about. Evan?
Mike needs to say it. Mike needs to say it.
Yeah, okay.
Right, Pete said earlier on that he was going to say some unpopular stuff, and I guess I'm going to say some unpopular stuff. I was very strongly against the skate park enlargement into the downs as owned by Bude-Stratton Town Council. I would have absolutely no objection to the skate park enlargement into the overflow car park as owned by Cornwall Council. However, that enlargement into the Cornwall Council car park is not going to be an option in a reasonable time frame. So we're now looking at either we look into the eyes of the user group and the youth of Bude and say, sorry, we tried our best, the cabling is such that we can't build what we wanted to build, and that's it, that's game over. Or we go with an option that takes another bit of the downs. Now, I don't honestly buy that the area between the two skate parks is not going to get trampled to death. I don't buy that one little bit. I don't buy it as a nature reserve. I don't buy it as an area of biodiversity, because I think the nature of anybody using the two bits of the skate park is in that it will now be two separate skate parks. That's in no way linked. The nature of that user group is they're going to be walking all over it. and they might even be attempting to skate all over it when the grass is dry enough. So for me, unfortunately, sorry, people of Bude, this project is now dead. We will attempt with all urgency to make another project that can happen in a reasonable time frame. But I was co-opted onto this council to put views of old Bude. I said at the meeting when I was co-opted there, I wanted to be a little lever on this tiller, not to alter the direction of the council completely, but to just tack it away to the needs of old Bude. And I think